It's been a few since we've talked about a loyalist, so it's time to talk about Space Vikings. Russ is probably the most controversial Primarch out of the Emperor's 20 kids. There's a general consensus about how most Primarchs are received, but Russ doesn't really abide by those rules. On one hand, he's a moronic blowhard, completely beholden to his prejudices. On the other, he's brutally efficient and loyal to a fault. After all, you don't get named the Emperor's Executioner because of your gentle nature. The closest Russ ever got to negotiations was informing someone they were about to die mid-swing of his axe. Why he was ever sent to broker peace deals is completely beyond me. Ladies and gentlemen, a man who has done precisely as much help as harm, Leman Russ. Mr. Russ was discovered upon the death world of Fenris, living amongst wolves the size of a Chevrolet Silverado. There's a ton of details I could use to explain this to you, but I think an analogy would do you best. Fenris is Skyrim, and Leman Russ is Ulfric goddamn Stormcloak. If you don't understand the reference, go play Skyrim. It's cheap and it's timeless. In no time flat, he ends up becoming the leader of the Fenrisians' Viking-like society, with many singing his praises, but none louder than himself. Understand when I say Viking. I am referring to proper Vikings, not some romanticized version Showtime or whoever the hell is portrayed. These are old-school, heavy-drinking, blood-eagle-making, fight-loving roughnecks, which carries us smoothly into the Emperor's introduction. The Emperor arrived to what is possibly the weirdest interaction out of all the reunions of his sons. One day, Russ was doing standard Viking shit, throwing a massive party, getting hammered, the usual. Then some no-name beggar shows up, and wouldn't you know it, it's the Emperor. Once revealing himself to Russ, he would not be met with reverence as usual. Instead, Russ called bullshit and immediately challenged his father. The ending of these challenges is always hilarious to me when I think back on it. Russ challenged his father to an eating contest, then a drinking contest, then a trial by combat. Russ would go on to win the first two contests, but he would be so engorged and fall over drunk, he could only hold his own for a couple of hours before getting knocked clean the fuck out by the Emperor. Let it be fully known, that would have been the result, drunk or not, it just might have lasted a bit longer. I just love informing people that Russ ate an entire buffet, got shithoused, then proceeded to challenge humanity's most powerful creation to a fistfight. In all reality, that's just Russ. The man is constantly fucking around precisely because he wants to find out. If a conversation devolves to him and his brothers punching each other in the face, he is having the time of his life. Which, funnily enough, is exactly what happened between him and Lionel Johnson. Russ really wanted to kill a guy because he was talking all that good shit making fun of his legion. Then, when he finally decided it was time to act, he would show up just in time to watch the lion kill the guy instead. In an argument that was pretty much someone yelling about kill stealing in a Black Ops 2 lobby, it was quickly turned to violence. They engaged in a fistfight lasting several days, and eventually Russ quit fighting and just started laughing his ass off. As Russ is howling with laughter, the lion sucker punched him and then ran away before Russ could wake up. I don't consider that a win on the lion's behalf, but I do consider it a very defining stalemate. Anyway, back to our dude. Russ decides, yeah, you're probably my dad, I'll come with you. He's then awarded with his legion, the Space Wolves. An important note is that these are no longer simply Space Vikings, these are Space Viking werewolves now, and they do exactly what you think Space Viking werewolves would do. During his fun working under the Emperor, Russ would go under a great many names, but none more defining than the Emperor's Executioner. Some legions were tasked to conquer, others were sent to sabotage. Russ and his wolves were sent when the Emperor wanted a motherfucker dead. He wanted his family dead, he wanted his house burned to the ground, and he wanted to piss on the ashes. Russ was far and away the most loyal of his brothers, and the Emperor knew he could always rely upon him when heads needed to roll, regardless of circumstance. There's actually slight rumors that go around here and there about how Russ is responsible for the 2 legions that are wiped from history. Speaking of stomping out other legions, this is as good a time as any to talk about the civil war Horus started. If you're a fan of the Thousand Sons, you know what happens next. I'm sorry that your Primarch is the way that he is. After Magnus the Red pulled off the absolute worst Kool-Aid Man entrance in history, the Emperor dispatched his executioner to drag the wayward son back home to face punishment. Magnus would render his planet completely defenseless, accepting whatever fate had in store for him. Realistically speaking, the Emperor was pissed, but not Casey Anthony level pissed, so it's entirely possible he could have been understanding and not killed his kid. That is, until Horus got involved. At this point, nobody knew he was evil, so as far as Russ was concerned, when Horus gave him new orders to kill Magnus, those commands came straight from the Emperor. The whole situation at Isfahan is considered when the heresy really got going, but I consider what happens next to be the real beginning. Russ reaches Prospero, sees it completely defenseless, and immediately begins glassing the planet. As the planet is burned to the ground, Magnus sits in his house, watching from the window, waiting for it to reach him. What would be henceforth known as the burning of Prospero is always going to piss me off, and here's why. It's a conflict that never needed to happen. If Russ wasn't such a raving goddamn lunatic and bothered to think for a single moment, he could speak with his brother. If Magnus wasn't such an arrogant little bitch and took any proactive steps, the conversation that followed would be able to prevent the whole civil war to come. Every last person who could have shit the bed here did. When Magnus finally had enough, he came into battle disintegrating people by glancing at them and then trapped Russ and himself in a cage made of lightning. I refuse to cede ground on the idea that Magnus could not have intervened sooner and spoken to his brother. Even if he died, he could have at least bought time for an evacuation effort. Whatever. The fight ends up with Russ snapping his brother's spine over his knee, and Prospero is left in the shitter for no good reason. Now on to an actual moment of glory for Russ, because that was a victory that should be looked upon with great embarrassment. When the Civil War was reaching its peak, Horus was juiced up like Arnold in the 80s off Chaos God energy, and Russ was busy on a DMT trip. He was doing some chores for Space Odin in efforts for him to figure out concepts like humility and even temperament, but it's still Russ, so it only went so far. Space Odin then gives him the strongest spear in reality and tells him to go handle business. Although this weapon absolutely fucks, that newfound shred of understanding and compassion arrived at a horrible time. Russ sooner than later ended up squaring off with the chaos-empowered Horus, and I'll be damned, Russ actually won the fight. However, instead of delivering the killing blow, he tried to reason with his brother one more time. These two had spent the most time together out of all their brothers, as they were the first found by the Emperor. This appeal led to Russ getting utterly skewered upon Horus's talons when he lowered his guard, and both legions dragged their unbelievably fucked up Primarchs away. Horus at this point is mostly just a husk that the Chaos Gods are having a tug of war over to control, so comparatively speaking, he got better much faster. Russ didn't have that kind of assistance and remained in a bit of a coma for the rest of the war. Now what did he do when he woke up? Your guess is as good as mine. He told his legion he would be back when things got terrible, but I'll be real, things have gotten very, very, very terrible for the Space Wolves, and he's still not back yet. I don't have proper fan theories other than my own psychotic ramblings to give you here. My best guesses are he either got trapped like the Khan, or he's doing his own version of Corvus stuff, becoming a space Viking werewolf god. If you're a Russ specialist of any kind, feel free to give your best guess, I won't hold you. I suppose that brings us to our end today. A man who it is impossible to distinguish the myth from the legend. The Wolf King to some, the Emperor's executioner to others, when he arrives, you will have an opinion about him. Unfortunately, the perception he gives off is probably going to be rooted in however he was feeling that day. Let's hope you don't land on one of these savage without a moral compass afternoons. In any case, that's all the knowledge I can impart upon you. Hopefully you see Russ and his space wolves as more than just furries, as that is the natural risk of having an inordinate amount of werewolves in your employ. As per usual, thank you for stopping by today. I'll see you on the next one. Have a good night.